recording video or just audio?
It's audio.
Oh, so I should probably stay close to the laptop, actually.
It's pretty good though. There's a mic on the stand.
Okay, cool. So, hello everyone. Thanks for being here at 9. Appreciate it. I was like, who's gonna come at 9? I have no idea. My name is Liz Davis. Did I get this? Other way. I am a UI UX designer at SPR Consulting here in town. Do a lot of client work, consulting work, fun stuff. My background is actually in animation, and then the only job I could get was web design, and then I kind of transformed into UX, as most graphic designers have done. And so now I'm doing UX, and I'm actually going to DePaul, but I go downtown, which is not as fancy as this place, let me tell you. They put us in a building and, you know, left us there. There's not even plugins in the walls and the desks, so I have to talk to somebody about that. But as you can see, I like talking about this topic because I have some experience with disability being in a wheelchair. I was born without certain back parts that just kind of moved together and just did a wheelchair my whole life. I grew up outside of Chicago where there was very little resources to be independent, and it just kind of relied on my parents and my brothers to kind of grow up as an independent person. And I didn't really get in the disability space until I moved to the city. I remember being very apprehensive about it, like, oh, you know, I always separated myself. I'm not like them. I'm different. I'm normal. And when you grow up and kind of mature, you kind of realize, well, it's okay to be different. And everyone, it was a good community to find, especially in Chicago. There's a lot of awesome people here doing a lot of awesome things. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to how you include that community in your design, research, coding, whatever you do. Are there designers in here? Mostly coders? Designers?
Design.
Cool. Anybody do UX? Okay, so about half the room. Awesome. Anybody do research? Okay, good amount. Thumbs down.
I don't do research.
Okay. So we got like 5 or 6 hands. Well, let's talk about, this is going to be mostly like research-based or maybe how you engage the community in general, no matter what kind of project you have. So first, the big trendy topic right now, inclusive design. Microsoft's talking about it, Airbnb's talking about it. All the big names are like, we're inclusive, it's awesome. And to me, when a company talks about being inclusive, it makes me kind of like, I think it's great, but it's like, but really, are you? You know, are you though? How many people with disabilities do you employ? And they're like, well, we have one guy who, you know, he broke his leg once. That counts, right? No. So I'm very apprehensive about this topic, or when I hear people say this, because it's really good intention, but sometimes you can completely miss the mark, and you edge towards sympathy instead of empathy. And so, first, oh, no, I forgot about this slide. See, it's cool. It is cool to be inclusive. If you aren't inclusive, you're seen. It's a negative thing. I'm bad. I don't do it right. Well, it's okay if you don't understand what that means. So, first step to admitting that you don't know anything is to admit that you don't know anything. This is my favorite dog meme in the history of ever. I guess I could describe it. It's a golden retriever with glasses trying to do science, and he's just pouring it in a coffee cup, which I assume is his owner's coffee cup. You know, maybe it's got a vendetta or something on it. And it says, I have no idea what I'm doing. And that's what a lot of people don't want to admit, and that's okay. So, we're going to talk, well, the key thing here is to talk to someone with a disability and get their opinion, especially on research, because they're going to know the best way to test your product in their perspective. This is my dog Willow. She looks happy. We're going to be happy by the end of this talk. So first, to understand the disability community, for me, it really empowered me as a disabled person to understand the history of disabled rights and how amazingly crazy it is. So first, we have the disability rights movement has been going on since the 60s and 70s. It picked up right when the civil rights movement was going on as well. And this was a slogan of the 1990 ADA, nothing about us without us. And this is a really powerful statement because I think it applies to literally every minority ever. You know, we talk about that now with diversity, with African American, minority communities like Latinx, all those sorts of communities, and this applies to disability too. No one is going to be able to tell you what works for accessibility than someone who's disabled. So first, we have 1978. Gang of 19 laid in front of buses in a busy Denver, Colorado intersection for 2 days to protest a lack of access to buses. This was in the 70s. This group, they turned into ADAPT, or they were ADAPT. They just got out of wheelchairs and laid in front of buses. Like, how badass is that? I never even knew that. They didn't teach me this in school. I found it when I met other people in the disabled community. It's so cool, and because of that, Denver has had accessible buses way before anybody else in the entire country. The 1990 ADA. I feel like I felt this too. Like, it was like happy-go-lucky. Oh, we passed the Americans with Disability Act. It was great. You know, was it Bush Sr.? He wanted it. Everyone wanted it. But it actually stalled in committee. And in response, the disabled community, there was about 400 protesters there, and 60 of them got out of their wheelchairs and crawled up the stairs as senators were coming out of the building. And there's a very famous shot of this young girl who was probably like 12 or 13 at the time, you know, giving an awesome quote about how she's fighting for her future because they can't even get into a building that represents them, and how they were very invisible. And then this scene is a great kind of like Renaissance image where you have like 10 cameras up at the top here as these people are crawling up these stairs. It's very amazing. It blows me away. And then, you know, 1990, we're in the past, right? We solved it. Good. 2017. You guys remember when that guy that's president, I won't speak his name, was, they were trying to repeal the ACA. And ADAPT, which is a very kind of like awesome radical protest group, they go in and they put their bodies on the line and like do sit-ins and die-ins, they call them. And this was a die-in at Mitch McConnell's office to protest the ADA repeal, or ACA repeal. And this woman, her name's Stephanie Woodward, she was arrested and cuffed in her chair. Now, you know, I don't trust people to push me, so the fact that she had to be pushed out while her hands were cuffed is like mind-blowing. And there is a gentleman who was blind being dragged out of the office by Capitol Police protesting the repeal. Pretty badass, right? I mean, I learned a lot about the disabled community. They did a lot of hardcore stuff that no one really ever knows about. So now we can see this image of disabled people kind of being like, oh, we need to help them because otherwise they won't be able to access the world. Or they won't be able to be independent without me, the designer. You know, design can be power. And if you have the power to make it better, you should. But not because you want they're a charity case that you want to make better, but because we want an inclusive world, and that includes everyone. So how do we do that? We talk to the people we're trying to help. So, interesting thing, the World Health Organization, I think 5 or 10 years ago, they redefined their definition of disability. And I'll just read this off real quick. Disability is a complex phenomenon reflecting the interaction between features of a person's body and features of the society in which he or she lives. And then at the bottom, I crossed out complex phenomenon and put experience. So basically this definition is, I'm not the problem. The problem is you designed those stairs without a ramp. And that takes the burden off the people with disabilities to be normal and to kind of come back from the medical model and be synonymous in society, and says, hey, society should probably change for them. You know, we make things to augment ourselves all the time. You know, glasses are like the original prosthetic wearable. And now and people wear them to look cool. So, I mean, imagine like 10 years in the future, people get wheelchairs because they all of a sudden they realize how cool it is. I mean, I'd be fine with that. So, how do we know, does anybody know any disabled resources in the area, like any groups? It's okay if you don't. Just wondering if anyone does. No? Okay. Well, thanks to advocates in the 70s, 80s, 90s, there is pretty much an independent living center in pretty much every part of the country. And there's one in every county in Illinois. And we'll go to the map later. But the first step is to find these communities that are out there already helping people. And I put some ones that are here in the city, actually. We actually have a mayor's office for people with disabilities. She's awesome. Her name's Karen Tamley. She is on the United States Access Board, which some of you who might be familiar with the WCAG rules, they oversee guidelines for like the transportation department and all sorts of things on what has to be accessible. She's in the city, and now she's the president, and she gets to be on the front lines talking about what the government needs to actually push for, especially in that sort of space. And she's awesome. So if you ever are curious, go look on their website. It's terribly non-accessible, but you can't blame her because it's the city. Anyway, it's complicated, you know. Access Living here in Chicago. They are on Chicago Avenue, I think, right up on Clark. They're a great group of people who do a lot of advocacy in the city. They do a lot of lawmaking in the city and in Springfield. They actually sued the city of Chicago because of the lack of affordable, accommodated housing. And they're really reaching into the intersectionality of disability in general. It's pretty awesome. And then the Chicago Lighthouse is a great resource if you're looking for someone who uses a screen reader. They're blind, visually impaired, mixing my terms. Or, see, I can't remember. It's fine. Blind people. That's their group. It's great. They teach people how to use screen readers if you've been blind recently and need to learn. They have all sorts of resources, and I think they have a podcast. I don't know if they're still doing it, but you should check it out. It's pretty great. And then the Great Lakes ADA Center is also another like hub to learn, and it's down on Roosevelt. People teach you how to use certain resources, how to cope with an injury, how to get better. In general, does this have a laser pointer? It does. Okay. Exciting. So here are the general ones you can look for. Local universities, they're always going to have disability office. They have one here. They can be hit or miss, to be honest, whether it's people just they don't understand or they're actually really involved. So take it with a grain of salt. Senior centers, if you're looking for the older community. I mean, people love to test your products, I'm sure. Social media groups. The interesting thing about Facebook and the whole privacy thing was Facebook and social media has been huge for people with disabilities. They've been able to connect and grow communities online, and so it makes them especially vulnerable to like all the kind of bullshit that Facebook's been doing. So, you know, another reason to keep fighting against them. And then active disability advocacy groups. So sometimes you'll see these in the news. We have like ADAPT, and that's the major one. But there's other like ones online, especially on Twitter. Disabled Twitter is really popular and big. You can always go for the hashtag. There's some ally hashtags, which many of you might know. A11Y, follow those. Here's the map on border. As you can see, in every county, we have independent living office. So if you're looking, if you know, in your St. Louis area, got some there as well. It's pretty great. What these resources offer, especially independent living centers, is they are kind of a hub in the community for people with disabilities. I never went to mine when I grew up because it felt very stuffy to me, but I was also a teenager, so who knows. But they do a lot of great work. They have advocacy, they have technical training or help for schools or people in the community. They teach independent living skills for people who need it, like how do you cook when you're sitting down all the time, or how do you do this, or how do you grocery shop when you have a wheelchair, that kind of thing. They're an information hub for like grants and resources for their family. I know like when I was young, my parents couldn't afford to put a ramp on the house, so they were instrumental in helping get that on the house so I could get in and out easier. And they are often staffed by people with disabilities, which is really awesome, doing their own work. Universities and colleges, students love to earn an extra buck. Reach out there. And then they usually already have your technical experience that you're looking for. And then social media, I kind of talked about this, but as you can see, they've opened up a flood of support groups. YouTube channels, like, very explanatory, like, hey, you have one arm, how do you do your hair? And I have a friend who has a really cool robot arm. It can't use it for everyday things all the time, but it's still really cool. Lots of blogs, gaming groups. Microsoft had their controller come out, and there was a huge community before that where they augmented their own controllers with like 3D printing and all that sort of stuff. And then, like I said, disabled Twitter. So, first step, I know, dog abuse, it's great. We have a dog up here who's wearing a tie, very important. Golden Retriever, typing on a laptop and looking very happy about it. Send out a friendly email. Reach out to your independent living center. They all have contact emails, and there's lots of disabled newsletters and things get sent out all the time. Like I wanted to interview someone who was blind, and it got sent out to like a statewide news list, and I had tons of people just emailing me. Explain the project a little bit, like, hey, we're trying to do usability testing on this app that we have. Would you be interested in helping us out? So let's say you've recruited. You got people coming in, and this is the part where I think people won't admit that they're most apprehensive when they have to interact with people with disabilities, because maybe it's something you're not used to, or you don't want to say the wrong thing, and you don't want to make them feel bad. But there are some things you should consider, and that's the first step to making sure things go smoothly. So, location. In the city, is the CTA stop closest to where you're going have an elevator? A lot of them don't, especially on the red line. Is it close, or can they get in the building? There was a meetup I went to once where there were just stairs there. Okay. But I've gotten a few meetups. Like if you run meetups, it'd be great if you could just note that in the event, so that even if it's not accessible, just call it out so that people don't go there disappointed. They can know ahead of time. It's really nice. Is there parking nearby if they're driving? Does it cost? Let them know. And then never assume it's 100% accessible. Like you're like, oh yeah, it's fine. But I mean, it's really hit or miss. Just kind of like explain what's there, which is the best way to do it. Like to get up to the sky deck in the Sears Tower, I once went through one of their freight elevators that is probably like a whole story tall, and there was no sides to it. It was just an open floor, and they just took you up it. I was like, this is amazing, terrifying. So definitely where the kitchens go. But I've seen some crazy back doors to get into places. I've been in like an elevator that you have to hand crank because they didn't replace it because it was in the kitchen. I've seen some weird stuff trying to get around the city. It's awesome, but also terrifying. Timing. So paratransit, if you're ever at Pace, it's really unreliable. Takes forever. I've heard of people who are blind who they get picked up and they're going to their destination, but the paratransit driver will take them somewhere else and then take them to their destination. So there might be delays.
Can you define paratransit?
Yeah. So you have Pace out in the suburbs. So paratransit is basically you can call a service the day before and say, hey, can you pick me up at this time and take me to this place? So it's especially helpful if you don't want to take the Metro in or you don't live close to the Metro. This is being kind of supplemented with Uber. Uber has Uber Wave now, and I've used it a few times, and it's not that bad, and it's actually pretty cheap. There's a lot of Uber Wave drivers who I've seen repeats do. They do it over and over again, so I see them a lot. But I have a van, so I don't use it that often. But out in the suburbs, it gets scarcer. So that's where kind of paratransit picks up the slack. But the politics of it and how they're funded and how they get money for the rides, it's very complicated, of course. So it tends to lead to a lot of either missed rides or delayed rides. And I've had two paratransit drivers. I'm just rolling down State Street, and I've had two of them stop and be like, "Hey, are you so and so?" And I was like, no. And they're like, okay. Like, they were looking for the person they were trying to pick up, and they just yelled out the window at me because I was in a wheelchair, and they assumed it was me. So it's crazy. So just be flexible, okay? And then assistive technology. From what I understand, I don't use a screen reader, so it can be up to the person, but let them use their own equipment, especially if you're just testing the usability of the app, not necessarily the usability of the equipment. So if you are testing a new screen reader, then you want them to use it. But if you're just testing your own website, don't try to get your own setup, because it's just going to skew your results, and it's going to make it seem like it's harder because they're going to have to get used to the setup themselves. Yeah. So if you get familiar, or give them time to go through it, and there's a bunch of research out there. I didn't pull it up, but screen reader users will rip your stuff apart and pretty quick compared to a normal user. It's very cost efficient. And here's the important part. You need to pay people, just like you would a normal person who doesn't have a disability. Give them money for their time. Our skill set, domain skills, that sort of thing. And then at the end, cute little service dog. I know many now that I have friends who are blind. It's great. Always have the door open for anything they might need extra. I have a service dog that's coming, so this 2-hour session, I'm going to need a break in between. That sort of thing. Just be aware and just be open to accepting things that they might bring up, because they will bring it up. We're all pretty smart to know that people can't read our minds. So just to recap: location, timing, assistant tech, payment, and additional access. So now, here comes the scary part: interacting with people with disabilities. I know everyone's supposed to scared, but you don't have to lie. It's okay. So, what if there's a dog laying down, looking up, very cute, but also worried? We don't know which one it is. And the caption underneath says, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I say, hey, you want to take a walk? Or hey, see you later to someone who's blind? Like, no one really cares. It's fine. I say I'm going to walk to a place all the time, because if I say I'm rolling, it sometimes sounds off. It's fine. Colloquialisms are fine. So, the biggest thing is teamwork. Be open to feedback. Don't be afraid to be corrected. And remember, we are just people, and you won't be perfect. And just treat them like a person, and you'll definitely be fine. And it'll be apprehensive at first, but you'll get through it probably. And then at the end, you can say that you did it. This is Rita with sunglasses on. She's adorable. And see, I told you I wouldn't talk that long. But this is, now we'll have question time, and this is my dog Hagrid that I just adopted from Paws. It's adorable. But that's basically it. So the recap is just, it's like every other testing session, you just have to plan a little bit more. Which is kind of like being disabled, though it's funny, I'm a terrible planner. I forget stuff all the time. I forgot medical supplies that I needed. My parents had driven 4 hours away, and we had to go to the hospital because I forgot them. You would think after like 20 years I would remember. Nope. So, questions? Yes.
Regarding website usability.
Yes.
Besides screen reader users and non-mouse users.
Yeah.
What categories of disabilities do web designers need to be sure and consider?
I think the big one right now is like neurodiversity, which is like different sort of intellectual disabilities. So is your content readable? Is it succinct and easy to understand and digest? And that's really good for usability overall. You don't want a lot of things to conflict with memory or time or age reading level. And that's something that is really great because it applies to all types of usability. I'm not sure exactly how you go about testing because there's still a little bit of like, because some people who are neurodiverse can't necessarily consent depending on how they are or where they live. So just that gets a little tricky, but I'd say that's more of an advanced skill. And then anything else? But color as well. It's a good one. Yes.
I just wanted to add that
Oh yeah.
next generation of accessibility guidelines, the Silver Project, is looking for ways to address cognitive disabilities. So hopefully there'll be some more resources for that someday when it comes
It's
out.
definitely an advanced level stuff though. But if you focus on making your website usable and for kids, you know, you do a good job. Especially for resources that are specifically tailored to that community. What else? Like a whole half hour.
Are there, I guess, who would be the best resource to nudge an existing site into being more compliant?
Like who?
Like who? Like clients are just kind of like, well, who's going to use the site? Like, what
Oh,
group would you
yeah.
go to say, hey, you use your site and it's unusable, and
Yeah, well,
we're X or we're Y group?
let's do a thinking experiment. So, like, what kind of domain would you do it? Like a
Like government
Government.
agency website.
well, for one, there's definitely laws covering that.
Like what would be the best group to do that?
I believe the Access Board, and then 504. 508. 508. They have specific things, and it's been ruled against the ADA that government websites have to be compliant. And you could just have someone as a screen reader reach out, and then if they complain, maybe that's the nudge that they need.
To add to that, you can go to the DOJ's website and look for WCAG, and it will pull up all of the businesses, more businesses, but that they have made settlements against, and that they've had some trends onto what they have each group do. The other thing that can help any business is that Google is starting to track some of these accessibility things, and in my experience, anytime Google starts to track something, eventually it will end up in the search. It'll end up in affecting your search results. So Lighthouse is an audit tool from Google, and they have accessibility scores now that you can track and monitor over time. And it's based on WCAG, but if Google cares about it, search engines will at some point too.
Also, I've seen consultant agencies that will bring someone they know or have someone with a screen reader come in, and they will record them using the website. So you can show clients, like, look, no one can use it, and that is very motivating to see someone not be able to use your website.
Did you say WCAG?
WCAG.
WCAG is
CAG, I got it.
the website accessibility group.
Yeah, what does it stand for?
Web Content Accessibility Guidelines.
Thank you. Michelle's also giving us accessibility talk later in the day, so go see her talk. Any questions about maybe this is kind of a safe space? Is there any apprehensive thing you've had with working with people with disabilities you maybe never had the chance to ask, and you just want to make sure you feel comfortable?
I have a question. Okay, so there's this weird line to walk between asking someone's opinion and asking them to represent an entire group.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any guidelines on how to strike that balance?
Yeah, I would give you my opinion about screen reader assessment, but I don't use one every day, so it would be hard for me to be the final word on it. But in the end, you're just getting someone's perspective. So if you have a website and you're gonna go, your audience is moms who have new children, and you interview 5 of them, you know that those are only 5 opinions, right? They're not gonna represent the entire community of people who are mothers and are new to motherhood. And so being able to just taking that into account, be like, okay, this is one opinion, it might change, but being open to if you get more feedback in and being able to receive that feedback is, I think, what counts. Start there and then open it up. Because that happened to me too. I mean, I thought I was, I knew everything about disability. I knew my disability and I knew my experience. And I disagree with people who are also in wheelchairs. I've gotten in fights with people who are also in wheelchairs and how we view the bus system. I love the buses. I know people who hate them because they think the drivers are rude. And I think, well, that's probably you, not the bus drivers. But it is tough because every person is different. And some people aren't as open about their experience. They're shyer to talk about it. But you can ask me. Do my best. Do you have anything to add? Or good?
I'm good. I just.
Did that answer your question?
It did. I mean, to some extent, you have the same issue with usability testing on quote unquote non-disabled users as well, in that you're only ever going to be scratching the surface by talking to a handful of people. You're only getting a handful of opinions, and then you're treating them as representative of the entire group.
Yeah.
But I guess I just wanted to be sensitive about asking one blind person to represent all blind people, and then say, okay, well, we tested it with blind people because we tested it with this one person.
Yeah. And maybe they use a different type of screen reader.
Right.
Or whatever. I think that's where it comes in with reaching out to these communities like the Lighthouse, because their collective knowledge is going to be higher than someone who's just been off on their own using JAWS for 20 years. The Lighthouse is going to know all the people and all the stuff that they suffer with or run into and all the errors that they have. And so that's where the community comes into and helps. Like when I started meeting the community, I learned a lot of things that I should be asking for that I didn't. Just because I was like, oh, it's fine, I'll just deal with it. But other people didn't deal with it, and so everyone has like this weird learning curve, sort of that. Any other questions? Yep. Go ahead,
So,
Christian.
one of my passion in life is creating solutions or tools for people with disabilities, and I'm an ACI graduate of DePaul, and one of my struggles when it comes to recruiting users is like my question is like is there any like website or any agency where we could recruit users like for accessibility and usability testing, and if you can just tackle a little bit of the rules or if there are like some regulations to that.
There's a couple I've heard of, but I don't know who's particularly active. That's why these communities that I outlined are kind of a good starting point, because maybe they can direct you, or they know, hey, Liz loves doing this. Why don't you reach out to her? We need to start just like a network of people who are willing. I know a woman who is a screen reader who used to work at McDonald's, who takes freelance, that sort of thing. It's just about getting your project into the right people, in front of the right people right now. And the disability community in general is really disconnected sometimes, especially people who identify. Some people who are deaf don't identify as being disabled. So like, it's really just like networking, and that's the hard part. You're most welcome to send me an email, and I can put you in touch with people who might be able to help you. You have a question?
I do. And this is from a place of trying to learn a little bit more. So I read a lot about like writing novels, and in the space that I'm in, there's been a lot of discussion recently about like diversity on the ethnic lines, and about how like the default assumption is unless if you describe someone as having dark skin, people think of that, but if you don't describe the skin color, everyone immediately assumes that they're Caucasian. A couple of times in the talk, you talked about like a normal person, and like I'm not sure I'm comfortable like using like like a normal person, and I don't want to be like super PC about it and try to like change that, but I just want to like because I noticed that you said like a non-disabled person, like trying to find that comfortable space to refer to someone who doesn't have disabilities as separate from someone who has disabilities, but not to reinforce them as quote normal. I'm wondering if you have an opinion about that, or
that I feel like this is a thing as a society we're trying to figure out right now.
Yeah.
In general, but I know my personal opinion is I use the example of like my boyfriend. He like. When you are thinking about dating someone, or you're going out in the field, whatever, you never think you're gonna end up dating someone who's in a wheelchair or disabled, but then you do. Like him and I talk about this all the time. Like I never imagined I'd be dating someone who's disabled, but I am, and that's just different. But it's okay. And there's also things like, well, we don't want to say they're different. but we are different, and that's okay. So I think highlighting the difference aside from normal, because my normal model is probably different than your normal model with someone who grew up in a different town or country. Their idea of normal is different than my normal, right? It's just kind of a, when I say normal, I'm referring to people who can walk or can see or can hear. And it's tough for me to stop saying those things as well, because it's so like ingrained in you that, oh, or I've even heard talk that we don't want to use the word able-bodied anymore, but I like to use it as sort of like a, not an insult, but like, oh yeah, he's able-bodied, doesn't understand. Like, kind of like a jokey kind of colloquialism thing. But even I've heard like, please don't say that anymore. I'm like, but what am I supposed to say? Not in a wheelchair? That's way longer.
Yeah, right?
It's way longer.
Like, I want to be respectful, but I also want to, like, have a short conversation.
Yeah. I know for media in general, it's when you bring it up is maybe like in a description, like if someone's a different race, you know, bring it up when was an American Gods. Anyone ever read that? They made a show and the main character Shadow, he's black in it. And before they were like, no, everyone like thought he was white. No, but it was black, right?
It's clear in the book.
Yeah. But everyone argued about it. Like, why does it matter? Right? But it matters because, you know, in the show, it's a representative character. And like the disability, for me, especially in media, like is the disability in the space they're not highlighted because they're that way. Like this isn't a story about someone in a wheelchair overcoming their life, which sometimes that's a cool story. But this is a person who's doing these things and they're also disabled. Like, you know what's funny is that came up a lot for me, like playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
Like, should I play someone who's in a wheelchair or should I play a normal person? Should I play someone who walks or someone in a wheelchair? Well, that doesn't make sense in a medieval time. So, but you know what I mean? Like, even you kind of struggle with that identity of we're elves and we're dwarves and we want to be all these cool things, but never a person in a wheelchair. And when does that kind of come into scope? So, I hope that was not a straight answer, but I hope it helped.
It did, thank you.
No, still a question? We still got like 20 minutes. Yes.
So what would you say that instead of able-bodied? Like, does it depend on the situation?
I don't know, I like able-bodied, but I haven't got the disability hive collective mind to agree yet. Like I said, we all disagree amongst ourselves too.
Well, it's important to use language where the people who you're with agree with.
Yeah.
You know, and most people will point out if they don't like, like sometimes in the disabled community, some people don't want to be called disabled, and if they point that out, and then some people are like, I don't care, you know. So it's just important, I think, to identify who your audience is and where your content's directed,
and I mean, you'll run into people who are going to be really militant and kind of angry if you use the wrong word, and then you're going to run into people who, like me, but don't really care. So you don't get scared off by someone who's militant because maybe they've just really been burned in the past. And I even avoid people that are really militant because it makes me uncomfortable. But I mean, sometimes people who are militant like that lay in front of buses to get shit done. So big introspective self recently is like, did I fit in this community that sometimes was militant and really, really pushes things that I don't think need to be pushed? But there's two different roles that people play in the community. Like, I do better talking to people who aren't disabled about my experience with disability than talking to the community who is disabled about my experience. Just because I feel like I grew up around people who weren't disabled, and it's easier for me to talk about it. And someone who maybe didn't grow up that way is like, well, the bus driver won't help me, and I hate them. And I'm like, yeah, but this guy, he's working, he has to deal with all these people on the bus. Like, it's just different perspectives. So, be sensitive, but don't get scared off, because not everyone will be mean to you, probably. So, yeah.
Are there sources of disabled media that like we could consume that have like characters who are part of the story in a book or a movie? Because thinking about this, like there's you mentioned being like certain people being uncomfortable in those situations. Nothing brings comfort like familiarity.
Yeah. Aside from media, there's a show called Speechless on CBS. It's on Hulu. I don't know what network it's on, but Speechless is great. It's about a guy, I think he has muscular dystrophy, but he uses an electric wheelchair, and That is the most accurate representation I've ever seen of growing up with a disability. Like, I felt like I was seeing my family on the screen for the first time ever. And I never had a problem, like, not seeing myself on the screen, but seeing that was just like, whoa, you know? There was like a quote in there where, you know, growing up with a disability, your parents if your parents aren't really rich, you know, medical stuff costs a lot of money. And, you know, we grew up pretty poor, and in the show, there's a quote like, we bought the crappiest house in the best neighborhood. And so there's constantly like, this, you know, shit's falling apart in the house, things are falling apart, and like, that was my house. And I just related to that so well about how, you know, you have siblings, they have to do everything for you, and then they get weird complexes because the parents pay attention to the kid with a disability instead of the siblings. And like, just to plug my own thing, I'm working on a podcast that kind of talks like this called Simply Different. And I don't have a website up. I was hoping to, but school, you know, all those things. But that's the kind of stuff I want to talk about, is that sort of media. There's a lot of podcasts you can look up.
Okay.
Search the word disability, or my friend Nikki is doing a podcast in the city here called Disarming Disability, and she has one arm, so it's really funny.
Is that the robot arm friend?
Yes.
Very nice.
It can control her nerves, like it knows her nerves. It's really cool. Let's see. Does anyone else have any media?
There's a movie called Station Agent.
I've seen it. It's amazing.
What's it called?
Yeah, but Station Agent has Peter Dinklage in it.
Oh, I've never seen that one.
It's just, it's a pretty accurate portrayal. Like, I watched it, I was like, oh, that's kind of me, but and Peter's funny. And it's interesting because, you know, as awkward as sometimes it is for the rest of the world to deal with people with disabilities, sometimes folks who have disabilities have the same awkwardness in like trying to figure out how to live in this world. And so that show, the movie, I thought showed a great, transparent representation of that.
My favorite like anecdote with that is if I go into a gas station by myself and the drink I really want is the top shelf, I don't have the emotional capacity at that moment to ask someone to get it for me. I'll just pick something else. Like, it's not worth my time to ask someone and go through that social interaction. I'm just going to grab the one I want and leave. So like different decisions that you make every day that you don't consider, it's super fascinating, I think. Like sometimes I've done it where I'll see someone going for the door and I'm like, they look at me like, oh, I'm going to help them. I'm going to open this door for someone. And I will like turn and go the other way and wait and then come back. Like, it's just a weird thing that I do. And it's not because I don't, you know, I don't want the door being held for me. That's nice too. But sometimes I'm just like, I don't want to deal with this right now, so I'm just going to hang back and sit here for a minute, let them go through, and then go through myself. So, weird stuff, man. Do we have a question in the back? I thought I saw another hand.
Well,
Yeah.
follow up on the terminology issue. It used to be that we referred to master-slave replication, and we don't do that anymore. Do you foresee a time when we won't talk about features being disabled on the software?
Oh, like thing is like this is disabled button or something.
Right.
I don't know. I never thought of that. That's interesting.
I know there's a trend in documentation to replace the word see, like if you go to a website to use the word navigate instead.
Oh, yeah, maybe. If we can think of a different sort of word, I suppose. See, there's people who have issues with the word disabled. I make fun of my friend who he got in this magazine where it was like this, and then abled was all capitalized. It was really, really clever, I guess. To me, that comes as like someone who is not disabled trying to be funny and inclusive. And it's fine, it's good intentioned. I would never diss them in public or anything, but it just makes me laugh because it's like, you're trying so hard, buddy. But, trying so hard. So I make fun of him all the time. Like, you're disabled now, Arthur. And he's like, the whole thing behind disabled hierarchy, like he's more disabled than me. He had an accident where he can't use his hands anymore, but he's a programmer, and he like forced himself to type. And so like I would always go over to his house, and I would get on his couch because I'm very mobile compared to him. And he was saying something to me one time, just being like, kind of like ragging me a little bit. And I was like, you're just mad because I can get on your couch and you can't. And just say that stuff in public and people like lose their minds. It's great. And you know, he laughed because we were friends. But some people cannot do that. So maybe in your professional world, don't do that. But if you go out for a drink or something, it's totally fine. Yeah.
When you're user testing with individuals with disabilities, I'm wondering if it would make sense to offer to come into their space, their home, their office, to observe them using whatever thing you're testing. It just seems like it would be a lot to ask someone to schlep their screen reader, their computer, whatever it is that they're using, all the way to wherever you're doing testing.
I think that's a good option to open up to people, but it depends on the person.
Yeah.
I have done interviews with people that I know have disabilities, and I mean, if they probably are schlepping to work anyway. So it definitely depends on the person and what level of disability they have or what their needs are. So you could offer it, I think, but don't be super pushy and be like, well, I can come to you. It's fine, I can come to you. Don't be over helpful because that's really annoying. But just offer it and see if put the bait out there. If they don't want it, don't worry about it.
There's also the option of paying for their transit time.
Yeah.
Or their cab fare, or whatever it takes to, make it more inviting to come down. So.
Great suggestions. Yes.
Is there a real advantage to in-person versus webcam capture of the usability test?
I don't know if it's any different than normal sort of advantages you get with remote versus in person. At least my opinion,
So if you use user testing,
Yeah.
usertesting.org or .com.
I think it's easier
Yeah, I think so.
.com, yeah.
I don't use it personally, obviously, but we do a lot of work in
Do they have a section for people with disabilities?
I don't know. That's what I was wondering.
Hmm.
But when it comes up, it's we get feedback, but it's great feedback.
Yeah.
Instantaneously, or near.
Yeah. I don't know. We'd have to check that out. I would say it's probably the same amount. Depending on their needs, they might not be able to do remote. I know one of the big things for employment for people with disabilities, if you're deaf or hard of hearing, a lot of tech companies require phone interviews. And I've known people personally who can't get a job because the recruiter will be like, oh, I'll call you back. Or I want to set up a call with you, and they're like, oh, I can't do call, I need to do in-person or video chat, and then they just don't call back. So that's an unfortunate side of things. Everything's kind of really grim or really optimistic or a little bit of both. But we got 10 minutes. Anyone have another question? Call it early if you want. And I'll be around after.
I got one more.
Okay.
A problem that I've run into recently I can have a website that has 100% accessibility score, but people will say that's not really meeting the definition of helping your user. And is there a fear, or is there any conversation going on out there of people just gaming Lighthouse? Because that popped up new to me in the last couple of weeks.
Gaming Lighthouse.
Gaming
Oh,
Lighthouse,
yeah.
alt text. Alt text exists, so Lighthouse says this is okay. But an alt text on one of my websites, if you would like to read this, go to this page, but that page is on GitHub.
Yeah. And that's where I think actually talking to people with disabilities comes in handy, because one of my research papers that I did was talking about WCAG rules versus problems that users actually ran into, and they tested a few websites with screen reader users, and they found that 60% of the errors that they ran into were usability, not WCAG, and WCAG wouldn't have even corrected them. Well, go ahead.
There's an inherent problem with the tooling, not doing manual testing, because it's only picks up 30% of the errors programmatically. So you can have 100% Lighthouse score, but it's not picking up on some of those usability things. So I totally recommend the manual testing as well.
And you're probably having non-screen reader users run into that, but they're able to recover a lot better. So really put that usability, which in a perfect world, right? But the key thing there, I think, that a lot of people talk about is on any page where you can have help, have a specific dedicated email to accessibility. So if someone runs into the problem, it doesn't go in their general box, it goes into a specific box dedicated to accessibility. So if someone runs into a problem, they can tell you about it. Because you're probably not going to catch everything. That's just how life is.
And that's one of the things the DOJ has asked companies to do, is and the manual testing, because any audit test only captures 30% of the stuff. So DOJ suggests you also do manual testing.
And there's some pretty cool projects going on about having websites kind of change to fit the tool, which I think is probably the ultimate way to solve accessibility, is let someone change the website to match what they need and still be usable, which is really exciting stuff, I think. So, but thanks for coming, guys. Appreciate it. Up here. And I will give you your.
Oh, yeah.